It's been well over a decade since Earl Sweatshirt stepped into the rap game. And as early as 8th grade in 2008-9, Earl recorded Kitchen Cutlery under the name Sly Tendencies. He posted tracks for the mixtape through MySpace. Notable songs on that mixtape were called Dadass, Deer Skin, and Mollywopped, including flip samples from the infamous Madvillain by the late MF Doom. It wasn't until Tyler the Creator discovered Earl on MySpace, which is when Earl really started to jump to another level. Being in 2009, he changed his name officially to Earl Sweatshirt and was recruited upon the Odd Future Collective at only 16 years old. Between this time, he would record Earl, his debut mixtape, releasing on March 31st of 2010, which would position his voice among Odd Future's relentless way that they swayed themselves across the music industry. The first official debut mixtape was meant to alarm others. It was under Odd Future, which really worked for Earl. The mixtape truly spoke for Odd Future very well. The mixtape's cover holds a child's professional shot, but with a twist, mimicking of how twisted Earl's brain is and how the lyrics will go tightly with the cover. The mixtape is accompanied by a much needed introduction to Odd Future from Tyler, including some praise and some friendly roasting of the newest and youngest member. The rest of the tape has Earl, a shockingly young rapper to many, rhyming in a way that could be mistaken for somebody half a decade older than him, at least. Especially with the horrorcore-like lyrics of murder, fighting, and rape. Although this tape was only 26 minutes, it showed who Earl was, how he fit into Odd Future, and everybody wanted to hear more about this kid by the end of it. But the only visual accompanied by this was a music video for Earl, where Earl and the rest of Odd Future use a blender to make a smoothie, with about every drug to exist, pills to malt liquor, drinking the concoction and continuing like any other day of their lives, skating and causing havoc around the streets of LA. But the smoothie ultimately causes them to get really fucked up, spitting out blood and going on a drug-induced manic episode. But upon these releases, this all came to a halt, with nothing but a new headline, Free Earl. A line that many fans knew at the time.
Free Earl, that's the fucking shit, and if you disagree, suck a couple pimple-covered dicks.
And free Earl, motherfucker.
Golf Wang. Free Earl, got it.
I'll beat your Wolfgang, Golf Wang, Flaw, nah, Free Earl mob.
Showed it at shows and especially on Fallon. Bringing out the mystery of where the hell is Earl? A 16-year-old prodigy in one of the most up-and-coming groups, gone. A lot of talk went around, whether he was in boarding school to boot camps, but among all of this nonsense, a specific location was nested between all of this, in Samoa. 4,000 kilometers off the shore of Hawaii lies an island called Samoa. The island is divided into two jurisdictions, an independent nation and American Samoa. It was only until February 6th of 2011, a photo at the Massanutten Military Academy featuring Earl was found, followed by the release of Tang Golf of Haji and Damo, where they say, "Ask Sid where we at, she'll tell you where we're going, to free Earl from the fucking Samoans." To step back, when looking at all of this, you have to look at his mother's view too, where she was also very worried about her son. Earl's mother has done very great work as a professor in the past, being studied and influenced by many. One of those people being Layla Steinberg, who helped Tupac through very hard years of his troubled youth, acting like a mother to him, eventually becoming his manager, where she states she left the business part aside many times. Layla connected with Earl's mother in a time of need, and with Earl, she said she came in as a parent, not a music business person, with the intention of helping him transition to a healthy life back in LA, pursuing his dream. Earl connected closely with her, flying her team of 10 to Samoa while he was in his program, to have Layla document the journey. The process of therapy and rehabilitation at Samoa was through levels, from 1 to 6, where you gain privileges of doing stuff on your own. When Earl arrived there, he was very upset, and his first year was terrible. He even described himself as the poster child for who you do not want to be when you're there. But as time went on, he left the troubled past behind and became a better version of himself. You have to understand that when Earl left, he was not a celebrity. Being in Samoa, he was isolated from technology for a year and a half. His rehabilitation all was happening while his best friends were becoming famous worldwide. These were very influential years of Odd Future, so when he came back, he was different, but so were his best friends. These series of events let his solo career boom. I can even say that Earl's debut mixtape played as a key puzzle piece to the success of Odd Future, and to Earl's own solo identity. When he arrived back, he did not speak deeply into his experience of therapy in Samoa, until he covered this very heavily with GQ before the release of Doris, where the interviewer asked, what's the biggest difference between Earl Sweatshirt in 2009 and Earl Sweatshirt now? Where he says he's fucking grown now. He was a little ass kid in 2009. I've figured shit out. Well, not figured shit out. That's ridiculous, not in some pretentious way, just as a result of time. He also speaks on the mixtape Earl compared to Doris, where he says, I didn't know how to keep a thought focus when I was young. And it kinda sounds like that. Like it's tight or whatever, but it's all over the place. He really understands how to communicate now. It's still the same him, grown and matured, with the ability to articulate how he actually feels. He's still sad, he's still the same Earl, but he has an actual foundation to his lyricism. The interview then asks him about working with sexual assault victims in Samoa, where Earl goes on about how he obviously wasn't trying to perpetrate like he was a rapist, but rather it was a form of expression, specifically stating that, I have so much fun performing Earl. That shit was what it was. That was our way of like screaming. That was like my way of screaming, because I don't yell. He includes the addiction that he faced before being sent to Samoa too, where he says it wasn't really anything radical but just smoking weed, but to the point where he'd been high for days and treat his body awfully, barely eating, only drinking Red Bull and smoking cigarettes, ultimately stating that he was really happy that he went, and it helped him figure out himself, saying that people figure themselves out at like 30 years old, and that he has a mental toolbox to help him cope and disarm addiction and other issues he once was troubled by. The interviewer then concludes the topic of Samoa by saying, after you went away, you made it pretty clear that you weren't forced away. That decision was the right one for you. Where Earl replies, I mean, I had to get forced away. But yeah, like I said, end result, I wasn't mad. Earl freed himself. Bringing himself back to society with the tools that he needed was the greatest step for him. Layla is still Earl's manager, and I blame much of his success from going to Samoa, which indefinitely led him to lead the life that he's in today. Throughout these steps, and especially through Layla, Earl learned how to articulate himself emotionally, bringing him to be one of the best lyricists in hip-hop today. He's still the same Earl, but the best version of himself, like we should all strive to be. Thank you so much for watching, and I want to hear what you guys think of Earl's solo career, and his role in Odd Future. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, guys.